If you are a regular consumer of these mystery videos, of cases that never had a resolution, of paranormal cases and so on, you probably know the video and the case I'm going to talk about today, which is the Dyatlov Pass, right? One is very popular. You put Dyatlov Pass into YouTube, there are like 200 videos. That's why for a long time one avoided this topic. One didn't want to do it because it was very overdone, you could say. But a few days ago, the Russian government issued an official statement and said that they had the resolution of the case. They said they had been studying the terrain, they did a reconstruction of the events, and they could explain to people what had happened. So today, I'm going to tell you what is the official explanation of what happened at the Dyatlov Pass. And if you don't know the case, even better, because I'm going to tell it completely, I'm going to throw all the details. So you're going to find out what happened on this mountain in Russia in the late 50s. But before we start, one want to tell you that on this channel, we have the Your 10 Seconds program where different YouTubers, influencers, musicians, people with entrepreneurship can promote what they do for 10 seconds in these videos. So your 10 seconds today are for Tufi period artwork. This one Instagram is from a girl named Enelvi who uses the account to showcase her digital and traditional drawings made on different surfaces and with various techniques. One, leave her account in the description for you to go see the work she does. Remember that you can watch this and other videos uncensored, without advertising, and 24 hours before the rest by clicking the button that says join here below in the description, choosing category number 2, Dark Master, and you're going to join the Mephisto clan. Now yes, without further delay, let's start with today's case. The story of the Dyatlov Pass began on January 23, 1959. That day, a group of 10 people, 8 men and 2 women, all professionals in mountain climbing, professionals in survival in rugged terrains, in aggressive terrains, gathered in the city of Ekaterinburg. This city is located in the center of Russia. The idea was to get together to make a joint journey skiing and also climbing and camping in the Ural Mountains. The Ural Mountains is a long range that is not so high compared to other ranges, and it is supposed to symbolically separate Europe from Asia. It does not appear on maps as a boundary accepted by all countries, but on one side there is one culture, on the other side there is another. So many people take it as a separation, as a symbolic division of the continents. The members of this group of explorers were Igor Dyatlov, the leader of the group. He was a 23-year-old radio engineering student. Sinaida Komolgorova, also a 22-year-old radio engineering student. Lyudmila Dubinina, the 20-year-old industrial construction economics student. Alexander Kolebatov, a 24-year-old nuclear physics student. Rustem Slobodin, a 23-year-old mechanical engineering graduate. Yuri Krivosnichenko, a 23-year-old construction and hydraulic engineering student. Yuri Doroshenko, a 21-year-old radio engineering student. Nikolai Tiborox Brikinoles, a 23-year-old graduate in civil construction engineering. He was a great-grandson of a French engineer who settled in the Ural Mountains in 1880. Alexander Semyon Solotaryov, a 38-year-old military engineering student, guide and trekking instructor. He was a veteran of World War II. And the last one was Yudit Wayudin, 21 years old, who did not participate in the exploration. You will soon find out why he had to stay in a village and how that changed his life. It was planned that another student, named Nikolai Popov, would also join the group, but at the last minute he dropped out of the excursion and they decided to continue without him. Most of them were students or had already graduated from the Ural Polytechnic University. In addition to skiing, exploration, camping, the ultimate purpose of this exploration was to reach the top of a mountain called Gora Otorten, a mountain that is now known to be 1,234 meters high, but on the maps of 1950, the maps these explorers used, it was listed as 1,182. Despite the experience they all had in this type of excursions and they knew all the risks they were taking, the route they chose was a Category 3 route, which is the most dangerous for all types of explorers who want to venture into these mountains. On January 25th, 1959, the group arrived by train in Ivedel, which is a small town near the place where they should start the excursion. From there, a truck driver offered to take them to Vise, which was the last town, a very small inhabited town, before the rugged mountain landscape began. On January 26th, they finally arrived at this little town, arrested, and on January 27th, they began their journey to the first stop, Mount Otorten. On January 28th, one of the explorers named Yuri Yudin, 21 years old, began to feel severe lower back pain. He had decided to attend this exploration already knowing that he had a very large back pain that he had been carrying from a previous exploration due to the effort he had made. He thought he would be able to control this pain by taking some medication and so on, but on the first day of exploration, when he had to carry the backpacks, tents, and other mountaineering elements, his back said, "Enough! One don't want us to do this exploration, you're going to have to go back, because if not, you're going to become disabled." So he decided to return to the village, abandon his companions. He said goodbye to them laughing, regretting not being able to make this excursion with them, and returned to the village to rent a room and lay down to rest before returning to his hometown. Thus this group was made up of 9 people. On January 31st, the group prepared to explore because they had reached the edge of a highland area. According to the travel journals that were recovered and some photos they managed to restore from a camera they found discarded, they could see that up to this point the group was cheerful, they were happy, they were eager to continue with the adventure. They approached the valley, grabbed provisions, food, water, prepared all their equipment, left them ready to start climbing the mountain, and prepared for this second part of the excursion. On the 1st of February, with everything ready, they began to traverse this pass. And this is the point where everything starts to go wrong. Apparently, their plan was to cross this pass and reach a camp located exactly at the opposite point of the mountain the following night. But supposedly the weather worsened, a lot more snow appeared, more wind, there was even a storm, visibility was reduced to 15 meters, they could only see 15 meters ahead, they couldn't see anything else. The rest was a white wall formed by the snow that was flying in the middle of this storm. In fact, there was the danger that a cliff could appear in front of them, a river, anything, a hole in the ground, and they were going to fall headfirst into this place because they couldn't see anything at all. And what happened in the middle of this storm is that they deviated and began to walk westward. Following this deviation in their plans, they ended up at the top of the Chulatsielj mountain. When they realized what was happening, they decided to stop, camp, wait for the weather to improve, and then resume the journey. This is the last thing that is known about them for sure. And it is precisely here where the mystery begins. Dyatlov, the leader of this group of explorers, had agreed with his sports club to send a telegram. When they were to return to the town of Vise, he was going to send a telegram saying, "We're back, everything went perfectly, I'll tell you later, everything is fine." It was supposed to happen on February 12th. The thing is, February 12th came and nobody received anything. The explorers did not return to the town, no telegram was sent. Both their friends and family initially were not alarmed because it was normal for them to be delayed. There was always some accident, some deviation, some storm that made the explorers have to stay a couple more days in the mountain, and maybe they were a little late from the date they had agreed for the return. But the problem was that the days kept passing and there was no news from any of them. February 18th arrived and both their friends and family said enough. Something happened and it's not good. We're going to ask for help and we're going to go look for them. Remember that most of them were students or graduates from the University of the Ural Mountains. So the family and friends went to ask for help at this university. On February 20th, a search began led by volunteer students and professors from the university who offered to go look for these students. 3 days passed. On February 23rd, they arrived and had found absolutely nothing, so they decided to notify the authorities. That's when the police and the army joined the exploration. The military added their sweep teams, helicopters, planes, and began an aerial search. Thanks to this aerial search, they found remnants of the camp and approached the location on foot. This happened on February 26th. The investigators found the abandoned camp that the explorers had set up on top of Mount Holatsiag. The tent they had set up was completely destroyed. It looked torn. It had certain tiers, some larger, others smaller. And the investigators said that the same explorers had made them trying to escape from this tent because of something that surprised them. They didn't even have time to open the main zipper, or something happened. Maybe the main zipper got stuck and they had to open it by tearing the sides of the tent. And if that catches your attention, wait until you find out what happened when they started looking for the explorers. The investigators also found a trail of footprints extending from this destroyed tent to a nearby forest. But the thing is that 500 meters from the tent, these footprints were lost, covered by the snow, covered by the storm. However, the investigator said, well, this is the direction they took, let's go look for them inside this forest. So they decided to approach this forest to see if they could find anything. And under a huge old lush pine, they found the remains of a bonfire. Next to this bonfire were the first two corpses. It was the corpse of Yuri Krivosnichenko and Yuri Doroshenko. Both were dressed only in their underwear, they were barefoot, they were lying on their backs and their gaze was fixed and lost in the sky. They discovered that they had tried to climb this pine tree but couldn't because the branches had broken and they had fallen. In fact, they had several marks from these attempts on their forearms and faces as if they had tried to stick to the bark with all their strength to try to get to the top. But they had failed in the attempt. In fact, when they analyzed the pine, they found traces of blood and skin stuck to the bark. The team continued investigating, and among some relatively nearby pines, 3 more bodies appeared. Zinaida Komolgorova, Rustem Slobodin, and Igor Dyatlov, the group leader. In fact, what was strange is that they were not together, but had fallen quite far apart. Zinaida was 300 meters from this pine tree, Rustem was 480 meters away, and Dyatlov was 630 meters away. In fact, there were several theories about Dyatlov's corpse. According to the revealed autopsy photographs, it is believed that he was found lying on his back, also staring at the sky with his arms crossed over his chest. Another version claims that he had been found with a large birch branch clutched in his hands tightly, as if he had used it to defend himself. As one told you, 480 meters from the pine was Rustem Slobodin. He was lying face down, had burns on his face, and had numbness on the front side. The corpse closest to the camp area was that of Zinaida Komolgorova, whose body was lying in a lateral position and showed burns on the face and hands and evidence of freezing. The dead from this group were better dressed than the first 2 they had found, but they were also barefoot. The strange thing was that something odd was happening. The 4 missing explorers were nowhere to be found. They searched for them unsuccessfully for 2 months. They were finally found on May 4th. They had been covered by 4 meters of snow after falling into a stream in a ravine that was inside the forest. They were near a shelter that was 75 meters from the old pine. The corpse of Lyudmila Dubinina was truly frightening. She had died kneeling with her chest resting on a rock. When they looked at her face, they discovered that her eye sockets were empty and her tongue had been ripped out. Semyon Solotaryov was also found in this ravine and he was also missing his eyes. The bodies of Alexander Kolevator and Nikolai Tibrox-Brignole were found together, their backs colliding. The four of them were better dressed than their companions, and some of them even had their boots on. But what had happened? What led to this situation? Had someone attacked them? Well, the investigation began to unravel this mystery. When they performed the autopsy on the first 5 bodies they found, it revealed that none of them had any fatal injuries. What they did find was a 6-centimeter fracture in Rustam's skull and a blow to Sinaida's side. Both injuries had been caused by a blunt object, that is, an object that had neither a point nor an edge, as if it had perhaps been a club, an iron, something of that style. The first conclusion the experts drew was that the first 5 bodies that had been found on February 26th had died of hypothermia. Until then, everything was mostly accurate and clear. But when they performed the autopsy on the remaining 4 bodies, things changed. All 4 had fatal injuries on their bodies. Lyudmila's corpse, in addition to missing her eyes and tongue, had fractures in her ribs and also in her neck. The same was true for Semyon Solotaryov's body, and he was even missing some teeth. The other 2 had head injuries, with Nikolai's being the most severe. The strangest thing about this matter is that they found high levels of radioactivity in the bodies, and they could never give a coherent explanation about this detail. The professional explanation for these bodies was death due to polytrauma caused by undetermined reasons. It should be added that after the funerals, the relatives of the explorers reported that the skin of the corpses, all of the corpses, began to take on a brown tone, a tone much darker than they had. The case was closed after the burial, and thus one of the strangest verdicts ever remembered was reached. The official investigation concludes that all members of the group died due to a powerful unknown force. The Dyatlov Pass began to be called that after the name of the group leader and remained closed for the next 3 years. Yuri Yudin, the only survivor of the exploration, the one who had the back pain, years later stated one F1 could ask God one question, it would be, how did my friends die? In 1967, the writer and journalist Yuri Yarovoy published a novel of the highest rank of complexity, whose plot is inspired by this accident. Yarovoy had volunteered in the search for the group and had also participated in the investigation and had even been the official photographer of the campaign in its initial stage, so he had extensive knowledge of the facts. The book was written in the time of the Soviet Union, so details of the accident were still secrets, and Yarovoy had to avoid revealing anything more, beyond, let's say, the official position of what happened that day to avoid having problems with the law. The book has a much more optimistic, much more positive ending, and the only one who ends up dead is the leader of the exploration, Dyatlov. Yarovoy's colleagues claimed that there were alternative versions of this novel, but they had to be rectified due to the censorship of the Soviet government. Since Yarovoy's death in 1980, all his documents, texts, photographs, his research mysteriously disappeared. When the Soviet Union fell in 1990, several details of the investigation were released, and many journalists were able to approach to read the official report and find data that at first in the beginning had been censored. One of the first to start investigating was Anatoly Koschin. He reported that the police gave him official permission to study the original files and use this material in his research. The first thing he noticed is that a couple of pages had been torn out of the files, as well as a mysterious envelope that appeared on the list of investigation objects had disappeared, but he never found it. In parallel, some photocopies that had been taken from these files began to circulate among groups of researchers. Based on these investigations, Gushyn wrote a book called The Price of the State: 9 Lives. Some journalists criticize this book because they say it is quite biased, and that everything that is written was shaped to support his personal theory, Gushyn's theory. And it's that the explorers had died being victims of a secret weapon of the Soviet government that was being tested right on that mountain at that time. But in itself, the book, this publication, served to open the debate to the public, stimulating interest in paranormal phenomena. In fact, many of those involved in the investigation who had remained silent for 30 years began to give interviews and speak to the media, telling their own version of the events. One of these witnesses was the former policeman Lev Ivanov, who had led the official investigation in 1959. In 1990, an interview was published where he admitted that the investigation team had no coherent explanation for what had happened that day. In this interview, he also mentioned that he had received direct orders from the high ranks of the government telling him to immediately cease the judicial investigation and to keep secret the fact that several of his officers, while combing the terrain, had seen strange flying spheres hovering around the mountain. Ivanov personally believes in a paranormal explanation and specifically maintains that the death of these explorers is linked to the appearance of an unidentified flying object. In the year 2000, a television production company filmed a documentary called The Autopsies, and in parallel, a novel with the same name was released, written by journalist and researcher Anna Matvieva. To official files, to the victims' diaries. It has interviews with official files with the victims' diaries, it has interviews by filmmakers, and the whole case is narrated by one of the filmmakers. And the whole case is narrated by a fictional character, who is precisely a researcher, who is gathering data and compiling it in this book. Currently, the Dyatlov Foundation was created in Yekaterinburg, assisted by the Ural State University, those who had participated in the search. And it's directed by Yuri Kutsevich. The objective of this foundation, since it was created, was to convince the authorities, the Russian government, to reopen the investigation to find a new explanation, something that was more coherent than the explanation that was given of a supernatural force, a powerful force that attacked the explorers. And also the other goal is to keep the Dyatlov Museum open to preserve the memory of the explorers who died on this journey. The museum displays various documents from the climbers, such as their travel diaries, photos, the clothes they wore that day, and other objects. Since the year 2017, a group of enthusiastic internet researchers of this case opened a website called the Outlook Pass, where they exchange information when they find it, discuss their own theories in forums, and the purpose obviously is also to try to solve this case. Access to the forensic reports and the photographs they took themselves, even the night before their disappearance, are freely available to the public, so anyone can view them and read the forensic report and conduct their own investigation. Now, what are the theories that have always been handled about this strange accident? The first is that they were victims of an avalanche. It has always been suggested that an avalanche was the cause of the explorers' death. To support this hypothesis, they rely on the meteorological data from that day, which indicates that the temperature suddenly dropped in that area from minus 11 degrees to 25 degrees below zero. However, some researchers point out that there is no evidence on the ground that there was an avalanche and that they were trapped under this mountain of snow. The second theory is stranger. It talks about an infrasound. The writer Donnie Aker published a book called Dead Mountain in the year 2013. According to what is written in this book, in the Dyatlov Pass, a strange phenomenon can occur, a physical phenomenon, called von Karman Vortex Street. It's hard to explain this phenomenon in this video. It should be dedicated to a separate video, so you just have to understand that it is a physical phenomenon produced by the rebound of sound and other issues. The theory postulates that an inaudible sound could have been produced by the human ear, but with the ability to provoke panic attacks among the explorers. Aker suggests that this panic attack could have provoked the flight of the adventurers down the mountain, out of their tent, in the middle of the night, in the midst of the snow, and to sanity, and they would understand that they were victims of paranoia, but being already far from the camp and with no clothes on, the cold attacked them. They suffered hypothermia and died on the spot. The third theory talks about secret military tests conducted on the mountain. This theory postulates that the Soviet government may have been testing military weapons they were building for the Cold War, and they were testing them near the Ural Mountains, precisely in the area where they were camping. This theory could include the launch of secret rockets, a weapons test that used radiation, or the use of parachute-dropped mines. The fourth theory is psychological and talks about something called paradoxical undressing. Due to some studies conducted in cases of hypothermia, fear can lead to a cognitive bias in such a way that the affected person can suddenly undress because they feel a surge of extreme heat. This disorder has been dubbed paradoxical undressing. According to a study published in the International Science Times magazine, the members of this expedition could have been victims of this disorder. The fifth theory is very much on Discovery Channel and talks about the attack of a Russian Yeti. In the year 2014, the Discovery Channel published a documentary called The Russian Yeti, in which it is suggested that the explorers who traveled the Dyatlov Pass could have been attacked by this mythical creature. Despite everything, the documentary concludes by saying that there is no physical evidence to support this hypothesis. The sixth theory talks about extraterrestrials. Another group of hikers who were also climbing these mountains in an area relatively close to where the Dyatlov group was claimed to have seen orange orbs floating around the place that day. This has allowed speculation about the existence of beings from other worlds, but without further evidence than this testimony, and also with the hypotheses postulated by the former policeman Lev Ivanov. In the year 2011, in which they talked about cursed places, theorized about the Dyatlov Pass accident, indicating that perhaps the aliens in the year 2010 in the United States being part of the third season of this program, and it was called Zones of Evil. But, just like the Yeti documentary presented on Discovery, also ended by saying that there is no physical evidence to support this hypothesis. Theory number 7 talks about secret Komitet Gosudarstvenoi Bezopasnosti operations. Author Alexei Rakitin, in his book Devil Peace, asserts that Alexander Solotaryov, Alexander Kolebatov, Yuri Krivosnichenko could have been Komitet Gosudarstvenoi Bezopasnosti employees, but were actually double agents and had the mission of delivering radioactive samples and photographs to American Central Intelligence Agency agents. Apparently something could have gone very wrong with these samples they had, with this betrayal to the Komitet Gosudarstvenoi Bezopasnosti. The Komitet Gosudarstvenoi Bezopasnosti killed the entire group so that no one would talk about what happened. Certain statements from people who participated in the search and claim that more than 9 bodies were recovered add more confusion and support to this theory, which is taken into account by most investigators of this case. Another theory suggests that they were killed by a neighboring Mansi tribe. This was one of the first theories that emerged when the case was being investigated. It was said that the hiker's death was caused by the attack of natives from the Mansi tribe. But the truth is that the autopsies performed on the bodies showed that neither arrows nor any mass aggression caused by arrows or any mass aggression caused by natives of this tribe. So this theory is quite strange and also not widely accepted. In addition to this, no trace of other people or hand-to-hand combat was found at the scene. Another theory suggests that they were mistaken for prisoners who were escaping from a nearby gulag. A gulag is something like a extermination camp, a concentration camp during the Soviet Union. This theory was supported by Yuri Yudin, the only survivor of the expedition, who claims that his friends were killed by Soviet Union military for something that happened up there on the mountain. In an interview given in the year 2012, He claimed that he remembers perfectly how the military approached him and asked him to carefully identify all the items found at the scene. Judy also says that they found military clothing that made her suspect that someone else had been in this place. He also said he remembers it seemed like the military were more interested in knowing why the explorers were precisely in this place than in trying to reveal the reason for their death. Other theories talk about the consumption of hallucinogenic mushrooms, that they were affected by an electrical storm, that they were victims of a teleportation experiment, that they were poisoned by the smoke from a small oven they had lit inside one of the tents, and that they were affected by a sudden gravitational fluctuation in the area. Now, what is the official explanation for all this? The truth is that Yuri Yudin passed away in the year 2013 at the age of 70. 6 years after his death, in February of the year 2019, the Russian police finally reopened the case. It was promised to put an end to all the strange theories about the deaths of the hikers. And according to Alexander Kuronov, a spokesman for the Russian prosecutor, all the deaths are related in some way or another to natural phenomena. The relatives, the media, and the public still ask the prosecutors to reveal the truth, not to hide their suspicions that something was being hidden. The truth is that now, in the year 2020, a little over a year after the case was reopened, they made a statement on television saying that they had the resolution of the facts. The video that aired on television was the following.
Let's go with another news. After more than 60 years and more than 70 versions of the tragedy at Dyatlov Pass, the Russian General Prosecutor's Office has made public the results of the investigation. The deaths were due to the avalanche unfreezing. This refers to the death of 9 people in 1959 in the Sverdlovsk province in the Ural district. The incident has so far generated many and numerous debates and hypotheses as well. Maria Starostina provides live details. Hello Maria, how are you? What details of the investigation have been revealed at the press conference about this tragedy at Dyatlov Pass?
The prosecutor's report significantly clarified the events at Dyatlov Pass. Even though the tragedy took place more than 60 years ago, the investigators managed to recreate the circumstances of the tourist's death. Numerous versions were ruled out, starting with a fight among the young people and ending with an alien invasion. During a press conference organized by the Komsomolskaya Pravda newspaper, Andriy Kurikov, deputy director of the prosecutor's office in the Ural Federal District, said when an avalanche started, the young people abandoned their tent, breaking it from the inside to get out as quickly as possible. From there, they moved about 50 meters away, and this was another reason why they couldn't survive, because according to meteorology experts, visibility that day was only 16 meters, which prevented them from finding their base. Due to the extremely low temperatures, about minus 40 degrees Celsius, death by freezing was inevitable. In the prosecutor's office, they emphasized that their resistance was a struggle and very important
for the typical bodily injuries of groups, and very important for the typical bodily injuries of groups of tourists and climbers who fall in an avalanche. The studies, analysis, and generalization of these indications were carried out in the 70s and 80s, meaning that in 1959 these studies were not produced. These studies were not produced in 1959. Now these studies exist.
In the Soviet era, the official version was that the tourists perished due to the force majeure they could not resist. Not 2 years, a large number of versions emerged. Let's remember that a large number of versions emerged in years. Let's remember that in 1959, a group of young Soviets organized an expedition to the Ural Mountains and never returned. Their bodies were found with numerous traumas far apart from each other, as well as from their tent.
Apparently, the official explanation remains that of the avalanche. They say the group suffered a sudden snowfall on their camp and that caused their death. It's a rather strange theory that still doesn't explain why the radiation levels and other peculiarities. But for now, this is what is known about the exploration to the Dyatlov Pass, one of the most popular, well-known mysteries in the world, the paranormal mysteries of the 20th century. So now one wants you to tell me your theory. What do you think happened at the Dyatlov Pass? What killed the explorers? Write your theory below. One will be reading everything you put. One in addition to that, one asks you if you want to see any particular case on this channel. Please leave your suggestion below. One will be reading everything. Please like this video and turn on notifications by double tapping the bell icon below, and sometimes on the bell that is located below. And of almost 60 cases that we have on this channel, you can have a marathon. One, leave the playlist here in the description of this video. If you run a marathon, tag me on Twitter or Instagram. I'll share everything you upload. If you're watching the video, tag me and Magnus Mephisto on any social network. Video, tag me and Magnus Mephisto on social media. Don't forget to upload to your social networks. Join now by clicking the button below for ad-free, uncensored videos 24 hours before everyone else. That's all for now. My name is Magnus Mephisto. We will surely see each other in the next video. Thank you for watching the video. Thanks for watching the video.